me remind
Mhm.
me again what the purpose is for and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so I have an internship with the Special Collections Library here at Penn State in the Petit Paterno Library. And essentially what they're doing is that they're collecting a series of Latinx experience oral histories. So essentially just kind of collecting your story, collecting other Latinx alumni stories, basically just telling what your experience was here at Penn State, what kinds of things you were involved in, how kind of your life played a role in, the things that you were involved in here, or the way that you kind of carried yourself after Penn State.
Sounds good. Okay. And
Yes.
the audience, what is the
Yeah,
audience?
so the audience is essentially just anybody that wants access to it through an archive that we're going to create in the library. I'm hope to kind of do like a distribution within like the Latinx community. So I'm currently the president of Latino Caucus. So I'm hoping to kind of do like a release of all of these oral histories so that the current students at Penn State can kind of get to know who kind of came before them and see the type of impact that has happened at Penn State from as far back as I can get stories. So
Okay, sounds like a plan.
cool. So yeah, so we can just get right into the material. So first, if you could tell me just a little bit about yourself in terms of like where you grew up, how that, you know, what kind of family structure you had, just kind of like the basics of who you are.
Okay. So grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, so right outside of Manhattan in the US. Family traces back to Puerto Rico, and dad born there, mother's parents born there, who then migrated to the New York City area, New Jersey area, and I grew up in New Jersey up through high school, up until actually going to Penn State. Yeah, me, my mom, my dad, my brother. Have a half sister also who's older than me. And yeah, spent my time in that part of the world. And going out west, even though Penn State's not too far west from Jersey, was a new experience. And so started that journey at I believe 17 years old. Went to Penn State Altoona for 2 years, and then transferred to Maine College, main campus during my junior year. So finished up in State College at University Park.
So can you tell me just a little bit more about like where you grew up specifically? So like Jersey City, like during your childhood, what was your neighborhood like? What was your town like? Was it a close-knit community? Not really.
I would say we moved once around the time of high school. So I think, growing up from birth to about high school, we lived, I don't know what you would refer to it as, but lower income housing, I would say, or so. And it was to me, it was home. So I think from a quality of life, close-knit family, close-knit friends. As I kind of reflect back, yeah, probably wasn't the most nicest place to live, right? But it was home for us, and we were happy. And yeah, a lot of the family lived within a couple of blocks or lived in New York. Had a grandmother in New York and a grandmother across the street, right? So, but it was an apartment complex in Jersey City. High school time, we moved downtown near the Hudson, closer to the Hudson River, which from a Jersey City perspective was only like 3 or 4 miles, but it's a big move. Still an urban environment. Lived in a townhouse. Now, when I go back and I see it, it's a lot nicer in terms of the area as to how it's gotten built up. But back then, it was pretty bare minimum. Your typical city block with a bunch of row homes. Growing up from high school, pretty much my 4 years of high school or so.
Do you remember like when you were growing up, like what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh man, I wanted to be a professional athlete, but I wasn't that good. So I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen. I wasn't one of those athletes that thought, oh, I'm going to be a pro. This is going to happen. I was one of those guys saying, man, I stink. So I'm going to like try to get a
What
job.
sport?
I played baseball, basketball, played baseball in high school. But yeah, it was my dream, but I kind of knew very early on I wasn't that star. I wanted to be an astronaut at once. I had watched that movie Apollo 13. I think it was like when I was in high school or before that, and maybe prior to high school. And I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to be an astronaut. But I don't know. I just knew I wanted to work. I started getting jobs when I was about 14. I've been working straight since I was 14 until
What
now.
kinds of jobs did you have when you were a teenager?
I delivered furniture. I worked at Foot Action in a mall. I worked at clothing stores. I worked in a restaurant as a busboy and then as a waiter. I worked just a bunch of odd jobs. I sold stuff before the internet and the Facebook groups to sell things and Craigslist. I would find ways just to find buyers for random video
Right.
games or whatever. So yeah, I was always trying. Oh, and I worked my first, I say, official job on the books when I got my work permit was at ShopRite in Jersey City as a cashier. So yeah, I've done a lot of odd jobs, and then through Penn State had jobs in school, delivered pizzas and internships after that, and then they became more less trade jobs, more professional jobs.
Right. How about like your family? Did anyone in your family attend college before you, or were you kind of like the test run?
I was the test run that got the farthest. My sister went, but never finished.
Mhm.
And she was older. She was already done with that by the time I was a young kid. She is about 18 years older than me. So
Mm.
never finished. Others had gone to junior college here and there, but yeah, I was the first to go and actually finished, and then my brother actually followed right after that and finished right after that 2 years
What
later.
about in like your hometown? Like, did people usually go to college or not really?
The hometown's big, right? So the city of Jersey City is a couple 100,000 people. So yeah, there's definitely people that went to college. I would say a lot of my friends took different routes. I mean, a
Right.
good amount of them went to college. Some finished, some didn't. A very good amount didn't go and went to more like trade schools and are doing well with whatever trade they're working in now. But
Right.
there was a big mix, like because of a big city, it's not a small town. I mean, there's
Right.
hundreds, not thousands of people that you surround yourself with over a
Yeah.
decade, 2 decades. So yeah, good mix. But I would say that, progress over time, more and more people were going to college and the more and more people finished high school. I think, this is going back to the late 90s and then early 2000s. More and more would I would say every year incrementally go to college and finish. So
Right. So how did you come to find out about Penn State, or did you apply to other schools
I
at
did.
all?
I applied to I have the data to prove it, 20 something schools.
I felt that. I applied to 14. So
Yeah, I applied to a lot of schools. I had an admissions counselor in high school who just said, we're just going to apply to every school in the world. So yeah, we did a lot of applying, did a lot of taking of the SATs. I'm not even sure if you still have to take SATs these days, but the test got to be submitted with the application.
yeah.
Took that a bunch of times. I knew about Penn State, but I wasn't like, Penn State second generation, third
Right.
generation, wasn't following, Penn State sports. I had never been to Penn State. I was in high school my junior or senior year. I can't remember when. And I always say this is kind of a moment that changed my life. There was an admissions counselor um, at Penn State Altoona who was also the men's basketball coach. His name was Kenny Macklin. His name is Kenny Macklin. And Coach Macklin was coming to my high school to recruit some basketball players. And the principal and the staff put me in charge as his kind of helper for the day, right? Someone comes to the school as an admissions counselor, you help them carry their stuff, show them around, etc. And so while I was kind of helping Coach Macklin, just started some conversations with him. He gave me his card and said, call me if you ever want to come check out Penn State Altoona. Long story short, in the middle of all these applications, I ended up calling him, making a visit, falling in love with the school. Walked onto the basketball team freshman year also, even though I didn't play basketball in high school. And so yeah, I went just because of that kind of moment. And while I had, you know, kind of scholarships and I guess I would say more grant money to go to other schools, I just had just kind of connection with Penn State Altoona that said this was kind of my home. So yeah.
And then what was it like leaving, you know, your family and all that stuff, especially because you said you guys were pretty close in like radius. So how did it feel coming to State College? Because State College isn't really accessible.
Yeah. Well, I started Altoona for 2 years, right? So
Right.
that helped a lot because my high school graduated 60 people and had 250-ish, I believe, if I recall, in the whole school. So for me, just going to anything bigger was a big change, but I think Altoona kind of helped in the transition, and then State College was kind of the next progression. But I think looking at it from a home to Penn State Altoona perspective, is a big change. I think again, I was working since I was 14. I was pretty independent. And so for me, it wasn't that big a change because I tended at an earlier age to do a lot of things myself, and I think that made the transition a little bit more I would say not easy, but easier to deal with. Or so.
Right. And then did you have any like impressions of Penn State? So other than like, you know, like the basketball after you had those conversations, but, you know, more in terms of like what Penn State holds, like, did you have any impression of Penn State in the beginning? And do you feel like your impressions or your experiences lived up to those impressions that you had?
I didn't know much about the school, right? I didn't know about sports history and
Right.
academic, you know, history, and I didn't even know there was 20 something Penn State campuses. I thought Penn State was just
Yeah.
Penn State, right? So truthfully, I didn't know that because again, I didn't grow up knowing a lot about college and people that went
Right.
to college. And so for me, I kind of just felt comfortable in Altoona, right? And I think it also helped. I played freshman year, I actually played two sports, baseball and basketball. I became freshman class president. Ironically, that was just random. I was walking one day and I got thrown into it. I was president of the Latin American Student Organization freshman year. I was doing a lot of stuff freshman year.
Right.
But the reason I share this is because when I look back, that was probably my safety net. I was just so busy that I didn't have a chance to get derailed. And so for me, it made it comfortable because from day one, I was involved in something like student government or at practice for baseball in the fall and basketball a couple months later. It was all year round. So that was pretty
Right.
much a very busy year that kept me occupied.
No, I felt that. I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
And do you think that, you know, people at Penn State Altoona or once you made the transition to University Park, do you think that people had kind of that understanding of your culture? Like, I'm not sure how, like, you know, how much you embraced that when you were at Altoona or here at University Park, but do you think that your Latino roots, specifically your Puerto Rican roots, like, do you think people understood that around you?
Way I look at this is I was lucky enough to have, if you go back, and this is what I recall, I could be wrong, but we can check the data. If you go back to then, and I still think now, Jersey City, New Jersey, right? Statue of Liberty town, as I would always say, is one that I think has been ranked the most diverse city in America many, many times, right? For years and years and years. And the way they, I believe, judged it back then was the number of languages taught in public schools, right? And it was like 100 plus languages or something like that. And that was the representation of my my life, right? I grew up on a kind of low income housing, one block from an Indian square and across the street from a Filipino square block, right? And then a whole melting pot of people in four buildings, a couple thousand people, right? And so for me, I was celebrating all of these different holidays as a kid, as it was just the world was all these different colors and flags, and that was normal, right? And so, yeah, anytime you come out of that element, things are much different. But I think what that also kind of taught me to do is I want to say, understand that I can maintain my authentic self wherever I'm at, but also adapt pretty well without having the need to have a support system or folks around to be able to do it. So again, I know that also doesn't reflect where everyone else is growing up, right?
Yeah,
Others
no,
up
of
in
course.
different places. But yeah, I would say, there was a big change in terms of the types of people that I were with. The way that I remember kind of tackling that as a 17, 18, 19, 20-year old was how I grew up, right? I'm learning about new cultures, new ways. And I applied a lot of the things I did just growing up, just trying to understand how I can learn about new cultures versus trying to feel like I had to be accepted from a culture perspective. And I felt totally accepted. I mean, I had a I still do have a great friend network from Penn State. I would say, if I look at my Penn State friend network, it's probably larger than my childhood network, right? And I think that spans a lot of different cultures, including my own. So.
What's something that you would say kind of kept you grounded within like your roots and stuff like that while you were in, middle of Pennsylvania?
Um, maybe my parents are probably the ones to ask about the grounded question. I don't know if I can judge myself on that yet, but I would say if I could judge myself on that, I've always been somewhat grounded just because of how I grew up, right? I grew up maybe not in the most wealthy situation, but it was a very grounded way of growing up, and a job well done to my parents to be able to teach me, my brother, and even my sister who was older, but how to kind of how you should live your life in their
Right.
eyes, right? So for me, I think it didn't really feel foreign to me, right? Because like I told you, even going from where I grew up until high school to 4 miles away was a close move. That was a foreign move too, right? It's a different world compared to where I grew up. And I think this is one where Penn State was just that next step in the journey. I think the other thing that I learned a lot early on was work, and how in work, yeah, you could say there's culture in work, but work is work sometimes. And I learned a little bit how to just focus on what is the task at hand and not get distracted much. So a lot of that, I think I probably tuned out if it was a distraction, but don't recall it much.
Right. So kind of moving into, what kinds of things you were involved in. So you mentioned, the basketball team, baseball team, Latin American Student Association, student government. What kind of drew you to those things? Like other than like, you were just randomly thrown into these positions, like you stayed with them for a reason. Like why?
I get that. Yeah, I've always been one, even today, if I'm going to commit to something, I commit, right? I'm not, even if I'm tired, I'm not going to quit. That's just going back to how I was raised, right? So that's just core. That's core me. Yeah, it was funny. I was looking just to have a fun time and let's go party. I'm going to college. I live alone. And I remember basketball, I had, there was a reason, there was a connection. I wasn't guaranteed a spot. I wasn't playing basketball, but I went and I tried out and made it. Baseball was my passion. I wanted to keep extending that. It happened for one more year at Penn State. But so I tried out there, and that was kind of the core. And then I was at one of those like just student orientation things
Right.
where everybody has a booth. You're there sitting there with your booth. Hey, come over here.
Right.
And it became, hey, join student government, to, hey, we don't have anybody running for president, to, hey, you're the president. You just won. So I was like,
Right.
whoa. And then I think the LASO, the Latin American Student Organization, I don't remember how I started, but I think it was probably one, if I think back at it, where it was probably connecting to the roots, right? This was my way of saying, hey, let me find a way to still stay close to my culture, meet a lot of people. I don't want to say that are like me, because other people outside of cultures can be like me, but that have a certain like for certain foods and music or whatever, and this also became a good group of friends of mine that I still keep in touch with. So
Right. And then kind of going back to your more academic experience, what was like your major? What did you get your degree in? What classes did you find the hardest, the easiest? Kind of
Yeah.
how did you adjust to the actual education component?
So school has never been my strong point. As you can see, I do other activities to broaden out my education. But I was never the best student. I learned to study actually at Penn State. I learned to physically study there at Penn State to survive, really, right? And I figured it out. But I majored in, it was an undersided major first 2 years. I think the branch campuses allowed this. And then I declared junior year was a business major, business management through the Smeal College at State in University Park. Classes were all hard for me. I'm telling you, I took a big leap from inner city school to, Penn State Latino to Penn State. It was not, I was not at that level of, let's say, sophistication and knowledge. I had a determination, but I would say a lot of them stuck out for being hard and difficult and a challenge, which I think helped in my growth and maturity. But they all stuck out as very hard and really a survival approach for me to have to get with it or get moving out of the school. So glad I was able to figure it out.
Right. And then you mentioned that you held some like jobs while you were in school and like you had internships.
Yeah.
What was like your experience looking for those internships to begin with? Like, especially like if you always had these trade jobs, like what was kind of your first step into that?
My first step is the same thing when I was 14. I just wanted to get a new pair of Jordans or a new pair of sneakers. And so when my dad started cutting me off, I was like, all right, I gotta work because I need these sneakers because I need to have the newest sneakers. So that was the original thought. And then as I got comfortable with that and learned in college, freshman year, I didn't work because I was doing all these things, playing sports. Right. I was like, wow, I have no money and my sneakers just look terrible, right? So I said, I need to go out and get some sneakers. Sophomore year, I ended up saying, look, I'm not going to be a pro. It's time to move on and enjoy the rest of my 3 years of school, right? So stop playing, didn't play sophomore year or onward. I forgot where I even worked sophomore year. I don't even know if I did work sophomore year, but junior year in State College, I worked at a pizzeria that doesn't exist anymore. I delivered pizzas. I worked at MBNA Bank, which is now Bank of America. I was selling credit cards. So there was a call center there. I did that for a while. I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch. I don't even know if that's still there, but
it's not here, but that's it. I didn't even know there was an Abercrombie out here at one point.
There was, and they paid well. I remember. I was like, oh, I'll take a job. Let's go. So I worked there on I forgot the street, but right downtown. I had a bunch of odd other jobs, and then I also got internships because one, it was a way for me to jokingly make some money, but also two, work towards getting a job because I had left sports to say, let me just focus on trying here to better my career, right? And it kind of worked out. So those I were able to get with a combination of the school, and then there was a program called Inroads. It's still around today, but it's a minority internship of US based, or I think it could be global based program that helps students of color to get internships. And so this was the way I got into it.
That's really cool. How about like once you were in State College, like obviously like there's a plethora of things that you could do for like fun, but like what did you find yourself doing for fun here in State College?
I worked. I worked a lot. I remember freshman year, there was not a lot of fun. It was all work and sports and stuff. Sophomore year, same thing. Junior year, I get up there. I started working, going to school, adapting. Did I join any organizations junior year? I think I joined, man, I can't even remember, but I know I joined not as like in a leadership position because I was like just so tired of having to do this for so long, but I did join some organizations. But more from a non-leadership perspective, and try to have a quality of life. But I was crunching the credits, right, to graduate in 4 years. So I was taking the 15 to I think as much as 20 something credit semesters or so. And yeah, so this was just a real big focus and really just build relationships with the people that I got to know.
Do you have any like special memories that you still kind of like, oh, I remember that time. What a great time here at Penn State.
Every night that I would go to Canyon Pizza, I don't even know if it's still there, and I would get pizza for $1. And I was like, This was before I worked for a pizza restaurant. I worked for a pizza restaurant because I wanted free pizza because $1 was getting a lot of money. But every time I can come and say 8 slices, $8, and feed myself for like 2 days, special moment in my life. Like it was really cool. But no, there's so many different moments. I think the main thing I remember is a lot of my good best friends, now still, were just based on the time and the grind that we went on together during those years. So yeah, it's just a good thing to reflect and say, the special moment. There's a lot of cool moments, but it really was about the friendships and
Right.
relationships they built. Yeah.
So now, I guess the question you probably are asked a lot, like, do you feel pride in being a Penn Stater? Why
Yeah.
or why not?
Yeah, I got crazy pride. Now I get it. Now I get why the legacy Penn Staters are just like there's no other school. So I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. They had Penn State pajamas at 1. They know what in Penn State. We're living in. I think I told you this. We're living in Switzerland. So we've been in Switzerland almost 2.5, 3 years. So the university setting is not the same as more of the passion you see in the U.S. and the sport. That stuff, but I'm teaching them about it. They know about Penn State. They know what the Nittany Lion is. We're going to make our visit one day. But yeah, I'm super passionate. After I graduated, I joined the Alumni Association. So served on the local chapter as a president in Montgomery County, PA, the Philadelphia suburbs. And then I joined Alumni Council, which is the governing board of the Alumni Association. Did that for like 6-7 years or so right after I graduated. And then finished those stints. And yeah, so there's still a lot of love, and it's definitely one that I'm super passionate about.
So your children are going to be the second generation.
Yeah.
Unlike
I mean,
you.
they will always have choices. It's their call, but
Right, but
yeah, but yeah, they get it.
Right.
They understood.
That's hilarious. So I guess kind of thinking back to your time, while you were here at University Park or even at Altoona, do you think that Penn State could have done anything to help Latino students more? Or do you think that the resources they already had in place were sufficient?
It's the broad question. I think depends on who you ask and what specifically you're looking for. I felt a lot of help from many scenarios, right, to help advance people in my, let's call it demographic or so, right? Hispanic males, Latino males that are in college. A lot of my grant money, right, whether it came from state grants or from Penn State specific, were tailored to that cause, right? And if you think about kind of my story, I mean, I had loans like a lot of people do, right? So I had to still pay my loans. But I think if you look at a lot of people, sometimes the derailer to college is financial, and it's not because my parents couldn't pay. It's that's a significant investment compared to other life items. And I would say, yeah, I could have been a lot more in debt if I didn't get certain things that, yeah, I think we're targeted towards advancing a demographic, right? And so I think there's a lot of ways to cut it, but I think from a support perspective, I couldn't ask for more, right? I couldn't say, hey, I didn't get enough because I got things that other people weren't even eligible for, right? And so and other people may have been more deserving, but I was able to take part in that. So I think it definitely helped. I think what was different, of course, and this is depending on who you ask, is yeah, you lose the culture identity when you don't have a concentration of 20 or 30 or 40% in Hispanic population, and it goes down to single digits, right? But I think the split of the demographic is going to change in many different settings throughout your life, right? And I think the question becomes, how do you narrow down one demographic versus many? This is a very difficult discussion that I fully understand, or not, the kind of circumstances I fully understand. And so I think this is one where, yeah, it would have been great to have had many more percentage representation of Hispanics like me, the more restaurants, more cultural events. But I think if also the percentage is lower from a headcount perspective, then that wouldn't really make sense because it's not in line with the demographic of those at the school, right? But I think overall, if I look back, I think I did get some support and help where it helped me kind of stay on that journey and didn't allow me to derail. And I think if I look at that, I think, yeah, it's fair. I think the cool part about Penn State and many other schools, but I know this for sure at Penn State, is that there's a willingness to continue to progress, right? And I think as long as that conversation is open, yeah, I think it's just about making progress incrementally, day over day, year over year. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I know you were kind of pressed for time, so I'm not sure like if this is
I have
like
like five more minutes. Yeah, 5-7 more minutes.
All right, so I have just 2 more questions for you then. How would you say that your life has been impacted by someone? So for instance, like did you have a mentor that kind of helped you through Penn State, or did you just have somebody in your life that has had like a positive influence on the course that you've taken?
The course that I've taken, so I mean, yeah, there's look, the number one answer is my parents kind of were able to filter, maybe what reality was of the world we lived in, into, man, this is the greatest place in the world. Every day is Disneyland, and I live in a super wealthy place, right? It seemed pretty normal and sheltered, even though as I grew older, I understood, oh wow, there are some other things here that aren't as I probably imagined them as a kid. So I think my parents kept me straight, right, and not derailed off course. And I think that's kind of the first piece. And then I can't name a second mentor because it would be unfair to the many that have been a part of it. But I'll say, the people like the Coach Macklins of the world that put a bug in my ear, gave me an opportunity, and then stepped aside. I think those are the moments that not define me, but kind of altered kind of my life course, because without those, I go down a different course. Doesn't mean that other course is bad, but I think those things gave me an opportunity to explore, and those explorations turned in my opinion, some of the best decisions of my life, like going to Penn State and other things. So yeah, it would be unfair to name one because I would say there's dozens, but I think it all starts with the grounding at home. And that grounding kind of created, I don't want to say a bubble, but it created kind of a place for me to stay focused and not get derailed. So. And I'd also like to thank all my old bosses in high school for giving me money, earned money by my Jordans, because this was my motivation to never stop.
Exactly. And always keep working.
Yeah. And it's funny, now I just like keep sneakers for like 5-6 years and they're torn up and I don't want to spend more money on them. But back then that was my motivation.
That was your thing. No,
yeah.
I think that's like, I feel like that's probably like an age group thing. Like you just go through that. It's like, I need these things. And then
my life won't work without it. Like I was like, I must have this.
Exactly. Well, those are all the questions I had for you. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. I had a great time, learning more about you and, your time here at Penn State. So I really do appreciate you for taking the time to, get interviewed by me for this project.
Yeah, no problem. Good luck. And yeah, happy I can help, and reach out anytime if needed in the future.
I definitely will. And like I mentioned before, I'll be sending you the release form so that I'll fill everything out. So all you have to do is just put in your signature. So
sounds good. All right, Heidi, take care. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Bye.